Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
For a year and a half now, Wendy had lived in peace and could safely call herself happy. For the first time in many years, she was finally her own mistress and owner of her home. And that too is not insignificant. Young people will say that a bit late in her happiness caught up with the end of the 6th decade. But Wendy herself did not think so. She didn't think she was old. So yes, she would soon be 60. So what? She didn't feel old at all. And now that she was back in her hometown, she didn't feel old at all. She used to run down these streets as a little lonely girl, then as a girlfriend and an artist, and now she walks as an old woman. And sometimes, secretly speaking, she feels almost the same loner. Yes, she's back in her hometown. Here too, many would appear fairy in the village, yes, from the big city, where, as it turns out, and still had a room. But first of all, this very village was also part of the city. The private sector is called a fairly large settlement on the outskirts of a small provincial town. Wooden houses, barns, livestock of all kinds. Everybody's vegetable gardens, for as long as Wendy could remember. There had always been rumors that all those chicken coops would be torn down. Residents would be housed in city apartments. There would be a new urban neighborhood in that place. The younger ones were happy about it, but the old-timers were scared. They would have to move somewhere else. But time passed and things didn't move beyond talk. And then whether times had changed or the city authorities had forgotten about their sector. But he lived and lived quite well. What was wrong with it? They had their own water and gas supply. A bus ran regularly to the center of the city. People rebuilt their houses, made them more comfortable. And why do they need these cramped, stuffy apartments in city blocks of flats? Who managed to move and even regretted it. Every now and then they came back to their native land. How could I forget them? They lived well as country folks in the city, all as one family. They celebrated holidays together. They also just gathered to chat, complain, brag, discuss the news, gossip, and watch the artist's performance. Yes, since she was little, Wendy loved to perform. At first, she recited poems and sang songs, and then she began to show small scenes from movies, copying performances of real artists. People liked it. They laughed, applauded, gave sweets. Her heart sank with happiness when she heard the adults, going to the club or visiting, talking to someone. Our honored artist will be performing today, and what's a holiday without our baby? She decided she would grow up to become a real artist, just like in movies and on TV. She shared this dream with her parents. When she was little, they only laughed. So you're an artist now. Why do you want to go to the movies? You can act here without any filming. Solo's parents were simple, kind, and hard-working people. The only daughter loved without memory, and to her statements about the career of an actress calmly treated. Many children invented the most incredible professions. They themselves also wanted their daughter to study, put aside money to help her hard. After all, the girl will be alone in a distant big city, where no one near her. But they never thought that Wendy would study to be an artist. That's another profession should get a separate, real, useful for life. Wendy's girlfriend's mother was an artist, and there are only two of them. And the rest are just like you in the villages now, entertaining people for a penny. That's okay, as long as you're young and young. But you're not young forever. Wendy had no time for school. She knew herself that to get ahead is not enough, just to be trained as an artist and to have some connections. Or marry a director? Why shouldn't I be lucky? Stubbornly thought she believed that her dream will come true anyway, and she still surprised her neighbors and parents, appearing on the screen at the local cinema. Of course, a separate profession is good, but they need to study well, know the sciences that she persistently do not give mathematics, their chemistry. It's easier to be an artist. Why do artists need chemistry? That's not what's important here. Although it was scary to leave home in a city where she had never been. People there live differently. Everything is different for them. She had heard and read in magazines and newspapers that there was competition and envy among artists. That the friendship they show is not there. She is a girl from the remote provinces, and she is not used to such attitudes. Everything with them is more open and frank. There were feuds between neighbors, of course. Have there been such neighborly wars? What's the point of modern TV series? If only there were a man with talent among them. You could write a whole book about it, but no one ever got around to it. Or maybe they didn't want to divulge all the secrets of their private sector. Young people, of course, wanted to leave. Some to study, some for a better life. Left after graduation. And Wendy. And now she's back after almost 40 years, not to the broken trough. As one might think, she was happy to come back, that it was better to live out her life where she began. Not young, but not old. At 20 years of age, it seems like 60. That's the end of life, and there's nothing to talk about. But before you know it, you'll live to see how long you've lived, and when you do, you'll be surprised. You're not even old yet. Live and live your life. If only you were healthy. However, Wendy herself did not complain much about her health. Nothing serious, but her back hurt. Her legs and arms hurt. How could she not at that age? Yeah, after the life I led, it's like every stomach aches, every joint hurts. It doesn't hurt, but it's painful. Just like a little child. If it wasn't for that, it would be all right. And not a mystery that gnaws at the soul worse than illness, arms, and legs. Yes, Wendy had a secret that kept her alive. Who knows if she hadn't gotten carried away with it and dreamed of a career as an artist. Had she listened to her parents, her life would have turned out differently. But it turned out the way it did. At first, it all worked out as well as possible. True, she had to deceive her parents to begin with. Wendy loved her father and mother and tried not to upset them, and she certainly didn't cheat. And here, yeah, she told them she was going to agricultural school. What did they enthusiastically approved? That's right, the daughter is, no matter how you look at it, the main thing in life. What without us villagers? Father approved. Mom had other considerations. And most importantly, it will be easier to get in. There probably aren't that many people going there. That's because she didn't graduate from high school. That's what they're looking at. What about her high school diploma? That's a disadvantage, of course. And the fact that she grew up on the land and knows all the farm work from childhood. That's a plus, no matter how you look at it. Don't forget to mention that. Daughter, when's the exams yet? Maybe Wendy would have mentioned it, but she was applying to drama school. And telling the admissions committee that she knows how to clean a barn or take care of a piglet is not a good idea. She was not going to mention that at all. Fortunately, she was registered, though in a small peripheral city. That is, she was not a hillbilly. Private sector and a house with amenities in the street is not written in the passport. She was well aware that her chances were slim. Apart from a modest diploma of graduation from 10-year school, she had only a character reference, where it was written that she was active and took part in school amateur performances. It was scary to appear with such advantages in front of the admissions committee, but she wasn't going to retreat either. She decided that if they don't accept her here, then she'll go to any other school. If not, she could go straight to the theater or some movie studio that needed people for extras. At least something to gain experience from. Who do you need to meet? And then we'll see the next year, even in 10 years, but she'll get in. And a miracle happened. Wendy was accepted the same year she arrived. I don't know if she impressed the committee with her talent or her looks. It's a far cry from the canon of beauty. Or maybe she just touched them with her naivety. Or maybe there was an order to accept a person from the people. And here you have just such a man of the people and rustic appearance. And with such a desire to become an actress that no one could resist. At first a loner who had no doubts that she would enter. All day long I could not believe that she did get in. Walked around asking if I was accepted. I really was accepted. In the end, someone from the admissions committee who Wendy didn't understand. She at that moment not only did not distinguish students from teachers, but even men from women angrily, said if you do not calm down now and do not go home, then we immediately send you home. That meant a bunk in the dormitory in which she was assigned. On the way she stopped at the post office, whipped off a telegram to her parents, accepted happily. Wendy, arriving at the dormitory, collapsed on the metal mesh of her bunk. No mattress was laid. And with happy tears she cried the whole day. Then, after the telegram, she wrote a 3-page letter home. Not because it was so long, because there was something to tell, but just lines from the great ones, when in their side went askew with happiness. There was nothing to tell yet, except how happy she was, how grateful she was to her father and mother, and how she wished them to be happy. Of course, she did not write about any of her future acting. To her parents, Wendy was a future agronomist, or something to do with agriculture. Yes, it was a shame to deceive her parents, but she consoled herself that it was for their own good. That's when she came 5 years later to a magazine with her portrait on the cover. Then they would know. And who knows? Maybe such a magazine would come out someday. After all, Wendy studied diligently. And everyone liked her. She was simple-minded, trusting, always cheerful and happy. After all, who wouldn't like a happy-looking person? Anyone would want to be infected, to be energized by good luck, or at least bask in someone else's luck. And Wendy's ride kept gaining momentum. It wasn't long before a real big love came to her. No, just coming to town, Wendy wouldn't dare look at a guy like David. A high school boy is handsome, successful. To even imagine that he could pay attention to her hick, it was just ridiculous. But it was not even beauty that seduced him. It was this provincial naivety of inexperience. Although Wendy tried very hard to look not a country bumpkin. After all, she was a future actress, not a collective farmer or something. And her parents understood that too. They did not spare money to equip their student. And before she left, they gave her the money they thought she needed, and then promised to send her money. So Wendy tried to dress more nicely and buy some makeup. She relied more on her taste and what other girls who had lived in the city looked like. And still I felt like a wire. And how to get out of this image? She didn't know. That's what David noticed. He decided to become her Pygmalion. That is, to educate the girl a little. He didn't talk to her about any feelings at first, but explained to her, "Honey, we're not engineers or teachers of the future. We are bohemians, that is to say, aristocrats. I understand you grew up in a different environment, but you can forget about that. Is that what your name is?" "Wendy." "I'm sorry, but that's the way cowpokes give off." That was offensive to hear. Although Wendy was embarrassed by her own name, which was too commonplace. But that's what she could do. That was the name written down in all the documents. David decided to begin by renaming Wendy. "Now, Wendy, come on, how's it going? Where are we going to go with you?" David really taught her a lot, including how to dress properly, how to behave. It was an early winter that year, and Wendy prepared for it brilliantly. To her taste, she bought herself a coat of winter nettles on the wall, with a knob of fur hat brightly appeared in this form in front of her beloved, hoping that she would be spoiled by such luxury, and he really did only differently. Yes, the only thing missing was a Valinki with spoons. The girl is confused. Why? Why do you think so? In my opinion, quite a good coat is very good. In line for a sausage, you will look a rare organic. But where would you and I go? Well, what are we going to do about it now? Do what? Now, of course, there's nothing to do. You can put it all in a trunk and fill it with mothballs. Let it lie there. If you keep it up, you'll need it by the time you're 40. And if you still want to be an artist, then what do you wear? It's cold. Okay, let's get you dressed, David sighed. And really come, he was nimble. Everything could get a pair of tights, appeared jeans, the most fashionable bag of cotton, a strange cut, a sweater white, long as the winter itself, a scarf, and most importantly a chic sheepskin coat, also long, qualifying, beautifully furred, open green with yellow fields. A miracle, not a sheepskin coat. Well, it's not new, but it's worn out. And it was a little too tight on the shoulders. It's okay to lose weight. You, of course, a little loss of 5 pounds, or even more would not hurt. And David was comforting. When Wendy showed up at the dormitory looking like that, the girls gasped. One, however, said snidely, "In my opinion, in this sheepskin coat last winter Kate went with David." By the way, Wendy didn't pay any attention to it. Who cares who went with whom last winter? And last winter she was still at school, living at home, and didn't know about any David. That's one. And two, this girl probably, out of malice, just doesn't like them. Jealousy, to be exact. It would be strange not to be jealous of such a thing. She sold her clothes, of course. She had no trunk, no mothballs. She sold them with a small loss of money. And what she had gained, she gave for fancy clothes. He should not dress her, of course, because he was not yet her husband, her father, or even her lover. In that, David did not insist that they become more than boyfriend and girlfriend to each other. She saw the key to her happiness. He just loves her. And apparently, the most important thing is put off until marriage, which will probably happen soon, although there has been no talk of that. Although the young man kissed her occasionally after parties at private screenings of foreign films, going to exhibitions, and meeting interesting famous people, Wendy turned into what David wanted her to be. She lost weight, became less simple-minded, cheerful, and was always sharp with guts. She learned how to smoke, although it wasn't a regular habit. She could drink wine and something stronger. She didn't like it much either, though, and thought she was cool. David was happy with her changes, too. The teachers weren't happy. Her grades dropped drastically, and she was pretty cocky at times. That winter, after the Christmas celebration, Wendy herself didn't notice how she became David's real sweetheart. The fact that they spent Christmas together and became husband and wife was very inspiring to her. After all, they say how you celebrate Christmas is how you spend it. Well, who do you spend it with, I guess? That's who you'll spend it with. Yes, there must have been some other considerations in that regard. But all of a sudden, the girl noticed that her lover had grown cold to her. And it was after that celebration that Wendy didn't pay much attention to it at first. In the first place, simply because she failed the session, and secondly, and he was still studying too, there could be difficulties. But then it was hard not to notice. She was scared. She should be. They were like husband and wife now. They were together forever, and he went somewhere alone and did not ask her to go with him. On the one hand, it seems like more time for activities, but on the other. But what kind of lessons will come to mind when she hasn't seen her lover for 2 or 3 days a week, and I started to have some changes in my body? Wendy could feel it at once and knew that it would not just end like this. But that didn't scare her. She was glad. Now David wasn't going anywhere. She knew that they were connected forever. David listened to her confession, sighed, and said, "What a child. Our baby with you." "What else could it be?" answered Wendy, who suddenly didn't want to be. And what is wrong with that? After all, even with children you can study and work and everything. It's just that we will become adults, a family. Yes, of course, the ship needs a dock, but not people like me. Not as a vagabond and an artist. You know, you and your daughter. But we can't be a tramp forever. And normal artists live a normal life. How do you know? I lived with them at home. I was their own man. Everyone has their own circumstances. I'm in mine. Living this very normal life that just makes me sick. I can't and I won't. So draw your conclusions, my dear. What conclusions? There's going to be a baby. Is there a chill creeping up on Wendy's heart? No, but it's too much. They say you can take the girl out of the village, but you can take the village out of the girl. So, listen to me. My good girl, I didn't swear my love to you. I didn't ask you to marry me. That's right. I didn't ask you for children either, as far as I remember. And now what? What's your problem with me? But we had one. It's not your child from terror, whispered Wendy, who was already all caught up. It was, and it is gone. Again, I didn't promise anything, and I didn't ask for anything. Yes, I played too much. I overdid it. I wanted to humanize you, you dark fool. To show you another life. You won't be an actress, of course. You'll be expelled soon. That's a fact. But there are plenty of other good creative professions you could excel in. You just had to be more active, lively, and absorb new things. And the fact that you're so drawn back to the barn, I don't care if they put you in a palace. All the same, you want a simple bourgeois family with a bunch of children. You want to nurse, work, and eat. Well, you're welcome to it. Only without me, please. I'm not going to be a part of it. What am I going to do it with? Wendy asked me tearfully. You have to be taught that too. All right, look, you have to have an abortion. You, of course, will be expelled. But you don't have to cry about it either. Transfer somewhere else. Become an art critic, a tour guide, a journalist. What abortion? It's dangerous. I don't want to. But am I a fool to talk to? So you're afraid. What am I supposed to do now? I don't have a pill for fear. Talk to other girls. Many have done it more than once and they live fine. I'm sorry, I can't help you. David. But understand, I love you. The girl choked back tears. That's your problem. If I marry everyone who swears in love, I'll have a harem bigger than the Sultan's. But I don't have a palace. So do as I tell you. That's all. And leave me alone, please. So you and I will have nothing more. Praise God. I finally figured it out. We didn't have anything from scratch. So don't drag it out. Sign up for an abortion. And in a little while you'll be happy and healthy, and most importantly, free. This conversation took place in a small park, not far from the dormitory. In early spring, nature woke up after a long winter, and the girl, abandoned pregnant, wanted to lie down, fall asleep, and never wake up again. The election was not just an abortion, and somehow David was sure that she would be expelled, and she herself already knew she wasn't pulling it. Not even taking into account her absences and neglected studies. What was the point of living then? And more importantly, how and where? She would be kicked out of the dormitory, go home with nothing, also ashamed. And then what's left? But in the main, David's rights will be easier without the child. She'll manage on her own somehow. But with a child in her arms, yes. Does she have the right, on her own, with nothing, to let her child out into the world? After a few days, Wendy died of fear and hopelessness. She went to the doctor. It turned out that first she had to make an appointment. That is, make up her mind again. And she didn't get an appointment for another couple of weeks. She came out of the clinic, sown with grief, which was much more serious than the parting with David. The impending expulsion from the institute denied her, said it was too late to have an abortion. Wendy could not share her grief with anyone, and she had no idea how to deal with it on her own. So the doctors couldn't help. She knew, she had heard, that some girls somehow managed to cope with the problem on their own. There are some cures or ways, but who knows about them? She was ready to give her last money, to endure any pain, any anguish, just to be free, and probably would have done something, if not for the incident, which became a warning. One of the senior class dream girl, cheerful, beautiful, and say able at night, was taken away by ambulance. And in the morning, everyone was stunned. The terrible news was that Kelly had died, and that was what made the girls cry. They were gossiping about what she had done before, and nothing. And now this. But what could compare to the grief of her mother, who, she emphasized, did not come to get her daughter's things in the lobby, hung the picture in a mournful frame. From it looked Kelly laughing, alive. Then the girls were gathered in the red corner by a woman curator. She gave an angry speech. What are you girls doing? Don't feel sorry for yourselves. At least think about your parents. Could it not be done without such terrible consequences? There is no problem. Go ahead, get rid of it for free. It hurts, yes, but will you be smarter next time? Kelly missed her deadline. So one of the dead girl's friends was crying, "Where's her baby going?" And the guy left. He turned out to be married. I'm not interested in those details. I know a lot of stories like that. Almost every year they do this kind of thing. And this one, you could say, isn't the worst yet. Yes, at 20 years of age, it will be lying in the wet ground. It's all thawing in the spring now. That's how they put coffins in the water. Keep in mind. But that's okay. She won't feel it when she's lying down. But you know how it is with others. One fool swallowed some pills. We saved her, but she became completely blind, and there was nothing she could do. Now she walks with a stick and wears dark glasses. It's a burden on her and her family. The other one. 5 years ago, she also drank something nasty. Not only a child, but all of her own intestines were burned. She was saved, so to speak. They cut everything out now. There's a hole in her stomach, and everything comes out of that hole. There's a special bag. A young girl, too. And that's the way life is now, and there's no way out. Someone was frightened. Yes, they do. Kelly will never get out of her situation, out of the coffin. Another will never see the light of day. The third will walk around with a sack on her belly until she dies. People will walk away from her. That's a desperate situation. And what's that? Well, you missed your due date, so give birth. You can't have one for yourself. Give it up, leave it at the maternity hospital, and that's it. The state will raise you, don't doubt it. Or maybe someone will adopt a mother who is a fool and will thank her for the rest of her life. After this lecture, Wendy could not sleep for a long time. It seemed to her that it was not Natalia, but she was lying in a cramped coffin, with cold spring water pouring in through all the cracks. True, the curator suggested she give birth and keep it, but that was a bit frightening too. What if you can't? She has her own child. And how could I look people in the eye? The girl on the next bed must have heard her sigh. She whispered that she couldn't sleep. Let's go for a smoke. They went to the bathroom, had a smoke. I couldn't sleep, either because she was going to be expelled soon or because of the news. All of the above. Wendy admitted it. Oh, I see. I knew you were in trouble a long time ago. It's David. He pulls a number like that almost every year. So you're screwed. What are you going to do next? Are you going home? No, you can't go home. Wendy shuddered at the thought of going home. There was no way she could embarrass her parents. She'd be evicted from her dorm. I'm already on the list of people who won't be allowed to take exams. You've seen the first assessment. How far along are you? About 4, I guess. Let's do it this way. I got an aunt here. She works in an office. Maybe a job with a place to live. Everybody's looking for me. There's a vacancy right now. I'm sick and tired of her. So I gave her you instead of me. She really wants to do a good deed. A job, of course. Oh, a job. As a janitor. But they'll give her a place to live right away. Service housing. And in time it will become all yours if you want. But it's also possible to stay here for a while. Have you decided to give up the baby? Oh, I don't know. What's there to know? I'm doing this to people. It's okay. I mean, it's bad, of course. But if there's no other way, I even know people who refused. They live normally, don't they? So my aunt's place. It's far away from here. On the outskirts, they'll take it. Why not? You're young. You don't drink. You're healthy. The kind of people who usually go to the janitor's office. God forbid, they'll take you. Don't doubt it. Don't say anything about the pregnancy right away and try to hide it till the end. And then explain that you will not go on maternity leave. That is all there is to it. You'll be on sick leave for a week, and then you'll be fine. Let's go. That's the way out. I just don't know what to do. Well, you'll make an appointment tomorrow. If everything is all right, then the documents from the academic department and everything. So they did, and a student of the Theater Institute, and she turned into a janitor. She was really given a room in a communal flat on the first floor, but with all conveniences. Her neighbors were also all the same colleagues. 2 janitors, a plumber, all with families. It didn't pay much attention to Wendy. Well, she moved in and lived. She is given a plot of land to clean. She started working. No one knew she was pregnant. For a long time, Wendy wore a variety of holy things in front of people, trying not to show her face unnecessarily. She wrote to her parents that she would not be able to come this year for the vacations. They have an internship in another area, also strict, but the next year necessarily already closer to the moment X. That same aunt, she turned out to be a housing supervisor. I went up to her and asked, "Why are you so shameless? Right away, you did not tell me that you are pregnant and going on maternity leave. Not for a long time. I've only been going for 6 months. I can work on maternity leave too. What's the big deal? I'm not going to sit idle. But we'll see about that," the aunt mumbled frowningly. Wendy didn't go to the clinic. She looked for a maternity hospital on her own and went there on her own. When she felt the approach of contractions, she gave birth rather quickly to a boy quite healthy. The doctors understood what to expect from such a woman in labor. They asked right away if I was going to give birth. I said no to my own child and refused to put on the breast. She didn't even want to look at it. She only asked to name him James, after her grandfather's father. She came home light. She told the neighbors that the baby had been born prematurely and that they hadn't saved it. Whether they believed her or not, I don't know. They didn't check, and who cares? And Wendy and her baby. From her, it is always cheerful, gullible. Looking at people, provincial girl little left, no longer glowed toward all who met her rosy young face. Wendy's head was always lowered. She was looking at what she was doing. At the broom. At the pile of garbage, some of the tenants of the house around which she was cleaning politely greeted her. She answered, but frowning at her feet, she thought everyone knew about the crime she had committed. No one really knew what she looked like. Probably thought she was just an average lady janitor in her late 40s, skinny and lonely, not wanted. That's what she was. Only she wasn't under 40. She had just turned 20. She lived like that for 5 years. She didn't notice anything herself, didn't see or hear anything, didn't notice any time. Like yesterday, raking the snow. Today the leaves are yellow, still had one nail in my head. I gave up on my son. I went to my parents on vacation, and on those visits I no longer lied. That is, I did not lie about my studies. I told right away that I was expelled from the institute. She got a job as a janitor. Of course, my mother and father were horrified by my daughter's decision. How come you're a loner? Where do you see that from university? Right into janitorial work? Is this a job for a young girl so beautiful, so literate? All right, not to the institute, but at least you would have gone to some college. Did you get a profession? Mother Reed, looking at her exhausted, as if the tallest daughter. Well, Mother, maybe someday I will. In the meantime, I'll work there. I'm doing fine. When I left, my parents were sighing, talking to each other. Oh, Kevin, something's wrong with our daughter in town. A person can't be that upset about an institute. And it's not the first year. Yes, I can see you're not blind. I never would have thought that our grade would come to this. And she won't say anything, she won't even complain. She's good, isn't she? Who does her mother and father want to deceive? It's like she's punishing herself for something with her life. Well, maybe she'll get over it. Don't worry about it. Mother didn't want to show her tears in front of Kevin. His health has become very bad. He gets a little nervous. Then he moans all night long. His heart starts pounding. On my next visit to Wendy's, my mother, after listening to him tell him that everything was as it was, that is good, said, you should drop all this good stuff and go back home. I see it's no good, but I won't ask you. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But there's a cure at home too. Go back and live well. Who's stopping you? It'll be easier for us too. My father's not doing well. He's getting sick. Wendy refused. She went back. The same empty, hopeless life began again. She got up after dark so she could clear the paths of snow or leaves or other debris by the time people went to work. There was plenty of work to do, and Wendy didn't complain about the difficulty. On the contrary, she was glad she was tired. The later she came home, the more tired she was, the sooner she would sleep. In her dreams, she sometimes managed at least for a moment to return to her former life, to be a skinny little artist, beloved by all her neighbors or a student and envied by her fellow students. But often the dreams ended with the same appearance of a boy who looked very much like herself. He was always a different age, looking at her from afar and asking, "Why, Mom? Why did you leave me?" Not all of her strength began to come back to life little by little over time. It happened unexpectedly to her own master. Auntie Not Bad knew her date of birth, and considering that it was her 25th birthday, decided to congratulate her. Having gathered all the team of workers of communal services, she presented the birthday girl. The bouquet congratulated her, noted her excellent work, and gave her a bonus. It came as a surprise to Wendy. She herself had forgotten both her birthday and her age. And then, all of a sudden, flowers of congratulations, warm words touched her. She even shed a few tears, something she hadn't done in a long time. For the first time, she thought that she could find her son, and at once she was frightened. Maybe he would. But how she would show her face to him. There she was, looking like that, a downcast woman in her 25s, looking like an old woman. She overheard two women talking. Wow. I thought she was being retired, and she's only a quarter of a century old. And she doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't go out. That's why she looks like that, because she's not really living. Something happened in her life. Her companion guessed. It happened, and you can't fix it. I have no right to live after what happened. But I had to find my son, so I could ask him to forgive me. But before that, of course, she should have cleaned herself up. She was not allowed into the store dressed like that, let alone anywhere else to find out about her son's fate. She had to look more decent, and to come into his sight, even accidentally, all the more so. Maybe he was adopted, and people who adopt are not poor, not stupid, though perhaps not young. And so if her James has someone whom he considers a mother, and this well-groomed, educated, well-dressed, and smelling of expensive perfume woman, and then all of a sudden she appears in the yard in a shabby jacket, cotton pants, and huge boots. Nothing she but frighten the child does not cause. And by the way, all these years she was saving up money. And so without any particular purpose simply did not spend. And there was nothing much to spend it on. She only bought potatoes, sausage, bread, tea, and sugar. She lost interest in all the goodies too, and she didn't want to cook at all. I didn't even peel potatoes. So I cooked tea in middles only brewed. She liked it strong by all rules, and there was nothing else to spend it on. My parents flatly refused her help and even add on delivery or sending me gifts that were more expensive than a box of chocolates. They got upset and complained. That's why the money was accumulated. Although what kind of savings? With her meager salary. But one day, rereading them, she suddenly realized that she was saving up for a possible meeting with her son, and he will soon be 6. And what if he still lives in an orphanage, waiting for his mother to come for him? We have to find out somehow, don't we? And one summer day, having booked her vacation and prepared to go to her parents', Wendy decided to go to the hairdresser, bought some cosmetics, a summer dress. That is, if possible, she took care of herself. The neighbors noticed it at once. Well, Wendy's come back to life, I see. You're really pretty, with your figure and your face. Why have you been walking around all this time? Like a dead old lady. Wendy didn't go into detail, she just said she was going to hers. So as not to upset her mother and father, she did not go to the station, but to that particular house first. Who to turn to there, she didn't really know. I decided to go to the headmistress, the one in whose presence I wrote the application to abandon my child. It was kind of scary. The old lady remembered it all rather harshly. Of course, she stayed that way, not even a little gray hair. However, not much time had passed either. Wendy managed to get into her office, but it was hard to explain what was wrong. 5 years ago, she gave birth. Turned out to be a dead end. The boy is trembling James. I wanted to know. She tried to find the words to convey to the doctors the purpose of her visit. So of course, understood everything, except the main of this very purpose. All right, what do you want now? At that time, 5 years ago, it was all explained that it was for good. Now it's too late. You won't know anything. How's that? Please. Holding back the singing tears, Wendy asked, "What, please, the one that isn't clear?" The girl, "You have no child. You gave him up and go away. Now you're getting in the way of work. Who let you in? I don't understand." "Cindy," shouted someone from the corridor. In a flash, a young nurse or something, doing what might have been her job as a secretary, appeared. "Have you seen this one? I'm not letting any more in." "What kind of a backyard is this?" "Please, complaints," said Cindy, pointing to the door. "Please." I didn't want to let this girl down. Wendy went out and stopped, leaning against the wall. Through the door, she could hear the supervisor reprimanding the girl. I should never have gone to that girl. I should have offered money to someone else. Someone else would know for sure. A girl came out of the office. She blushed with pouty lice. "What are you standing there for? Go already." Angrily she threw. "I can't just leave." Desperately she said. "Who's been working here long?" "Tell me?" "No one." "Go away. No one will tell you anything. You can't be here." "Should I call security?" "I'm out of here." "Goodbye," sighed Wendy, and headed for the exit. She wasn't about to leave with nothing. She was sure she'd get some kind of answer anyway. As she approached the exit, she noticed a woman, not a young woman, who was also about to leave. And it was clearly not just any visitor, but one of the staff. She couldn't remember, but she rushed to the front. "Wait, tell me, did you work here 5 years ago?" "I did." Surprised, the woman answered. "Why?" "I'm here." The boy gave birth to James and refused. but I think James is after my grandfather. So, thank God, Wendy exclaimed. Nothing but find out what became of him. Was he adopted or an orphanage? I can pay. What will you pay me? I'll get kicked out of work for this, with a wolf's ticket. Or maybe I'll go to court. Will you pay me? Yes. And suddenly, quickly, through her teeth mumbled, not looking at the companion. He was adopted by good people back then. Childless. I won't say anything else. I don't know. Get out of here. And Wendy left. She realized no one would tell her anything just because no one had any sympathy for her. And that's probably right. What's there to feel sorry for? Was she in a desperate situation when she abandoned her son? No, of course not. That's when she had 150 excuses. But as soon as she put a stop to that statement, she realized there wasn't a single one. And yet she didn't tear up that paper, didn't take the child away immediately. And now she goes around, begging, pestering people. And how would she now appear to her own son? What would she say to him? What trauma would she inflict on her own child? No, there is no use explaining anything to the child now. Asking him to forgive you won't even work. You have to wait until at least he's of age. If James was adopted by good people, he's doing well. I can't offer him anything yet. We'll have to wait and save up some money. And then after a while, I could get the address of his new parents. Very easily. For a bribe. How much do these nurses make? Who else is there? There's no point in going to the headmistress, of course. But you can go to these women, and they'll probably give me the address. I'll be able to see my child, that's all. In the meantime, what can I do? We'll live like this for now. Wendy, as planned. She went to visit her parents. She was amazed at how bad hers looked. Father Kevin had really given up a lot. Mom, what about Dad? Is he sick? Well, you see, he's sick. I'm not young either, I'm only holding on for him. I guess we'll never get grandchildren. Why do you say that, Mommy? It's quite possible that you will. What can I do? I can't just get you grandchildren from somewhere. You will, you will, you will. How long do we have to wait? Tell me, daughter, what's going on with you? You probably had an abortion. Oh my God, Mom. I didn't do anything, honestly. What are you imagining? I'm not making it up, but you could have had a baby by now. How old are you? 26 years old. I understand if you were in school, working at a good job. But instead of kids, what are you gonna do? Take out the garbage? Well, you know, my job's just as good. Anyone else has a baby. People have babies at 40. Well, then we really can't wait. How did we want you to be happy? A daughter. You're still working as a janitor. Yes, I do. And people appreciate me, love me. That's okay. What's wrong with my job? Of course it's good. Very good. Especially for someone who wanted to be an artist. I went to the institute. What could I do? It didn't work out for me. No, of course, it's not a big deal. It's just a pity for you and a pity for myself. Wendy didn't know how to make her mother feel better. Once again, the visit to her parents brought no joy to anyone. Why did I have to come here? I wish I'd stayed home. I wouldn't have taken any vacation at all. Would have worked the extra time, would have earned money. If I decided to save up, I thought, going home. How bad is it? God, this is ridiculous. Why is my life so bad? My life went back to the way it was. There was more work. I mean, she was always happy to take part-time jobs, cleaning other people's plots. Some girlfriend would come running in. Oh, I've got stuff down the stairs. We're going to the riot. Take the garbage to the dump. I don't have time. Yes, always, please. Besides, some tenants they already knew perfectly, strongly trusted her, and asked in the spring to wash the windows before the winter or wash the floors, clean the carpets, wash the linen. There was always enough work like that. They didn't pay much, of course, but it was a pleasure for Wendy to set aside at least a ruble of change, and there was nothing to do at home anyway. The only thing to do was sleep and eat. That was all. She had an old black and white TV. Her neighbor gave it to her when she bought herself a big color one. So she gave away her old Zenith for joy. She didn't like to watch much. There was nothing to see. Not interested at all in other people's normal lives, except for some movies. Even that was just background muttering in the corner and reading books. I used to read, but it was just before I went to bed. I had no particular interest in it either. So she lived that way, scrubbing and dividing the trees, marking the change of seasons. She remembered only the change of seasons, raking the garbage, and the day of her son's birthday firmly. But everything else was somehow forgotten. Every time she visited, her parents tried to persuade her to stay home. But they didn't have much hope anymore. They just said so out of habit. Wendy herself was aware that her mother and father were growing weaker. Their health was failing, but she couldn't stay. As long as she lived in the city, it seemed that her son was still there for her. Yes, he must have been, because he lived somewhere in the same place, maybe even on the next street. At times, she looked into the faces of boys of the same age, hoping to see her James. She was sure she would recognize her son, seeing him at once by chance. But that was not yet the case. Time passed, and one day, after another visit home, Wendy barely had time to pack her suitcase and go to work from vacation. Tragic news came that her father had died. She had to go home again. I went to bury my father, and my mother had to go with him. Her heart couldn't bear it. She even didn't have time to see her husband off to the last journey. My daughter had to see both of her parents off. "Wendy, are you going to stay now?" Her neighbors asked her. Wendy didn't even understand the question. Why stay now? She's got nothing here. She locked the house and went to town, thinking she'd never come back. And then the joyless, lonely life began again. Life, workhorses, people, seeing that she did not respond to any attempts to communicate, did not try to make contact with anyone. They got away from her. Even the men at work did not pester Wendy, apparently believing that the dull and withdrawn creature is not worthy of even signs of attention. No one asked her if she was getting married. Did she have any suitors? It was clear that she had nothing. Apparently, she didn't need one. She's lucky she doesn't need anything. And this, others go around, suffering, looking for it. And what's this? Worked, came home, slept, and then back to work. How is it possible to live like that? Sometimes they say, could or could not, Wendy lived. She was not a foolish woman. And in the evenings before she went to bed, she often thought about how useless her life had been. And she was, in fact, almost gone. That's life. She hadn't gained anything. She had no one. She was all alone. Yes, there's a son living somewhere. But is there any hope of finding him? She'll be retiring soon. You could, of course, keep working. Will they deliver? It's a tough job after all. And she can't stand it anymore. But if she retires, what will she do? It's not even about the money. She's used to living on a few bucks. But then what would she do? Longing was squeezing her chest harder and harder. And she was already happy to move to her homeland. It wasn't the same there as in the city after all. At least the life around people were somehow closer to each other. But now no one was waiting for her there either. Her parents had long since been buried. Their house must have fallen apart by now. Even in her father's and mother's lifetime, it was barely standing, and the young mistress had never paid any attention to it. What's the matter now? She has no one dear to her there. Her acquaintances, and those acquaintances, God forbid, if they remember her. And then that sad day came when Wendy turned 55, had to leave her job, draw her pension, and think about finding a son. Yes, Wendy, that was all she thought about. She counted the money she had saved. It wasn't much. Maybe she could go to a private investigator. There were, they said, but their services were probably very expensive. Her savings were hardly enough to find James, her son, whom she knew nothing about except his date of birth and name. But that too could be changed by God knows what his adoptive parents had done with him. In the meantime, life was getting harder and harder. From the apartment, that is, the room in the communal apartment. She wasn't kicked out, but she was surviving. The neighbors could use her room. So why not produce a lonely old woman with no one to stand up for her? The neighbors' children were growing up. And here it's an old lady no one wants. Yes, Wendy, she herself wouldn't mind leaving, but where to? And then a message came from her native private sector. A distant relative had passed away, and I was bequeathing her home to Wendy. And she was relieved to be on her way to the town where she had lived most of her life. She did not hold anything, and no one even had no one to say goodbye to. What a life I've lived. With a sad chuckle, Wendy thought as she gathered up her meager luggage for the trip home. She had not given up the idea of looking for her son. But first, she would have to inherit, and at the same time see her new property. When Wendy arrived, it turned out that she had another matter of no less importance. It was necessary to decide something about the site on which once stood the home of her family. Not much remained of it, but the plot was. The head of the settlement said that it could be sold for quite good money. That was very helpful. The money she would get could be added to the money she had saved, and that amount might be quite enough to finally find her son. Isn't it a little early? I'm out of town, aren't I? I've had enough. And the neighbors. Now what am I going to do? Wendy thought as she wandered around her property. In general, Wendy did not regret her return. It was good to be in their settlement. Almost nothing had changed. Well, yes, instead of the old store, which had nothing to buy, there was a new modern one called a mini market, which had everything and always. But it was still a sort of club for the locals, the housewives who gathered there to chat and discuss the lives of their fellow citizens. Only these were the granddaughters and great-granddaughters of those who had gathered here in the days of a single youth, those who could remember it. Long dead, only a few old ladies remained. But whether or not the cheerful little girl Wendy the artist is still there in their memory. Her peers, too, were not young women anymore, barely remembered Wendy. And they had no common themes. Yes, I'm tired, Wendy, of communicating with people. And now all the more so, she had a different task. She was busy fixing up her house and selling the lot. Time was running out at such an advanced age. Oh, how quickly. The lot had only been sold by winter, and the money probably would have been enough, but she didn't want to go anywhere in the freezing cold. She decided to wait for spring. She was so happy in a house that belonged only to her. No cursing behind the wall. No drunken husband rampaging, no bullying. Their sons didn't climb into Wendy's room. The other neighbors' daughters were thieving sassy. The girls didn't yell anyone at the door. When that witch ghoul dies already, the room is vacant, followed by a kick in the door. Even in the morning, even in the middle of the night. Wendy was beginning a new life, or continuing a life that had been cut short 40 years before with her departure. She was relearning how to communicate with people she didn't know, but who were almost family. And she was no longer the local janitor. No one knew her, but many wondered who it was that now lived in the house of the late Grandma Miranda. And Wendy was eager to stop and talk freely with the new neighbors, to tell them who she had been to the former mistress, where she had lived before. There was nothing offensive in these questions, nor was there anything embarrassing in her answers. Only about the main thing, of course, she did not say, because she did not yet know what to answer. Did she have children, grandchildren? Where were they? Who? I don't know. I don't know yet, but I'll find out. I will find out for sure. And so a year and a half of her new life passed. It was time to carry out the master plan. It turned out that with money and the ability to communicate with people is not so difficult. Of course, she didn't start talking frankly to anyone. Just got into a conversation with a neighbor's man, whom she asked to fix the fence, while he was a carpenter. It turned out that it was none other than the son of her former classmate, now deceased. Further, she recollected a little about the past, and then hinted that here she had gone to a foreign land, lost many acquaintances and relatives of one of them she had to find so. So it is necessary, but she does not know how. You see, you're an old man. I don't know the modern ways of the last century. It's young people who know everything. Some kind of phones, tricky computers, and all that. You don't have to go back to the city. They're just wandering around. I don't even know if I can find it. And that's Aunt Wendy. Not necessarily. I know a lawyer in my town. He can find you anybody you want. No, seriously. You give him as much information about a person as you can, and he'll tell you everything about him. I don't know how. And if you want, he will tell you not only about him, but about his grandfathers and great-grandfathers too. The neighbor said convincingly, "Is it really possible?" Wendy hesitated. Why is it so surprising? You say there are so many possibilities, and he has knowledge and connections. So if you want, I'll contact him. I'll ask him today. Only it'll cost you, not me, but him. And it's so neighborly, like his own man. Would it be harder for him? What are you talking about, honey? I'll pay as much as he says, and I'll be eternally grateful to you. Only it has to be like this between us. Don't tell the others. That's the way it is. But I'm not a woman to tell everyone. Just tell me who to look for. Well, everything you know about this man. I'll write to him tonight. I don't know how long it'll take to find him, but I don't think it'll take very long. Wendy went inside, quickly writing everything she knew about her own son. Name, where, and when he was born. Out with a trembling hand, she handed the man the sheet. Here's Michael. I don't know much about him myself. Well, you tell me, will he find it? No, but I'll pay anyway. Don't worry, Aunt Wendy will find him and give you your mate in the best possible way. But maybe not as fast as you'd like. You'll have to wait a few days. It was hard for Wendy. This waiting all day long, she went about her business, while everyone looked in the direction of Michael's new home, waiting and dreading his appearance. But as he comes with his hands spreading, I'm sorry, Wendy. He hasn't found such a man. There's no record of him. Or worse, he finds out more than she wants to know. He throws the same leaf in her face and says, "So you're the neighbor who abandoned her son, and now you're looking for him when he's already a father and almost a grandfather. He doesn't want to know anything now. And you too, you damn cuckoo." There were 1,000,000 answers to her question, and not many good ones. But how her son took after his father and David. Now he wanders around the world, or is in jail, or is ill with something. But even all that was not as frightening as what she did not even let out in her thoughts during the day. But at night she suddenly had a dream. Yes, so natural, as at him suddenly came neighbor Michael, dressed as a parade in a blue suit with a sparkler and a motley tie, with a cheerful smile, and joyfully said, "Do not look for the father. Your son died long ago in infancy." She awoke in the middle of the night in tears, something that had not happened to her for a long time, and she consoled herself until dawn. They say that dreams should, on the contrary, be interpreted. And in general, since Michael had brought such terrible news in such a festive way, then nothing terrible would certainly not happen. And if it's true that my son is out of the world, then I have no reason to live. And all the rest, well, yes, it's bad, of course. But I would still be with him, and everything would help. I would have put him in my house, even if he were an adult, she thought. And then, at last, Michael arrived. He was dressed quite normally, and with a smile rather reserved, just polite. "Good afternoon, Aunt Wendy." But there was James. He turns out, and not in NY somewhere, but in our town. He lives in our town. He owns a construction company, but it's a serious firm, as it turns out. It's known everywhere. Oh, really? Was he really both excited and scared, Wendy? Michael handed her a piece of paper. That's right. Place and time of birth. It all fits. Yeah, James is a rare name. I've never known a James in my life. Sorry I didn't give you his home address. It's not really allowed. But the head office is right downtown. The phone numbers are all there. And there's even a cherry on top of the cake. Picture. I can hardly contain myself. Hurriedly paid Michael, said goodbye to him. I wanted to be alone to look at the picture. My neighbor, apparently aware of this, did not linger. He left. The woman stared at the portrait of her son with the eyes of her father. And so I meet James, my boy. But he's apparently happy. At least he's rich. And of course, we'll have to go downtown to what? But at least look at his son. I didn't want to confess to him. I didn't feel like it at all. It was embarrassing and pointless. It was ridiculous to think that a 40-year-old man of 40 would throw himself on her neck screaming, "Mama, how lucky you are to have found me." Especially considering that he was raised by a very different mother, the one who gave him all the education, upbringing, love. But no one will forbid me to see him. After all, at least a glimpse of the secret, but it is completely lonely. A woman must see the one she gave birth to. After all, did she not redeem herself with this lonely, difficult life, which had only work? And longing for him, for James. The next day, Wendy packed up and drove to town. Their settlement, which the townspeople called a village, was also within the city limits. But going downtown, everyone said so. I'll go to town. It was necessary to get there by bus, which ran quite often. After all, many of the villagers worked there. The ride to the center took about an hour, so it wasn't that long. Well, it's not hard to find the head office, which is probably where James is working at this very hour. I wish I knew what time he got off work. She arrived at her son's place of work around noon. Maybe he'll be out for lunch, or do they have a canteen right there? It's such a swanky, modern building. Surely there must be. Wendy walked along the building, looked at the windows behind one of them, and suddenly noticed advertisements near the main entrance. We're hiring a cleaning lady, so that's me. Good thing I have my ID with me. I'll go now, and if they hire me. Wendy was in a hurry. I don't want anyone else to take the job. Others might want it too, but only for a paycheck, and give her the work here. It was the only way she could see her son, maybe every day. She entered the building, asked the security guard where the Human Resources Department was, walked to the door indicated. For some reason, she thought she would see her son there immediately. But no, there were several women sitting in the large office. Wendy sat down at the desk indicated. The woman listened to her flip through the paperwork questioningly and shook her head. You certainly fit the bill, but here's your age. Wouldn't you, Wendy, be too hard to work? And you don't live very far from here. Oh no, that's not the kind of work I've done. And I'm not idle now. It's just, my pension's small. So what's left to sell from the garden? So will they buy more? And that, I assure you, is even harder than driving. So you don't doubt it. I always start work at 6 o'clock a.m. We have a bus here. Dying of shame, I convinced my boss, Wendy. Well, she didn't know how to ask. She tried to do without it. But this time, there was no way around it. While she was saying all this, she did not notice how the door opened behind her. A man came in, stopped in the distance, listening, and asked the employee of the personnel department, "What is the question here?" Yes, here is an applicant for the position of cleaner from the private sector. Also age, I don't think it's that important. We have no right to refuse for these reasons. On probation. I mean, first let them show you the front of the line. See for yourself if you can handle it. Of course I can do it, Wendy promised, trying at the moment to control her tears. With elation, with bittersweet happiness. After all, it was the first time she'd ever seen her 40-year-old son. Yes, it was James. And now Wendy could see him fully, not as in the picture. Yes, he looked like his father David, and not just with his eyes. Just as tall, slender, and he looked like her. But not today, of course, and not even 40 years old, but that young one. Not yet born him. Because when she came out of the maternity hospital without the baby, she began to rapidly turn into an old woman. And now she could neither touch him, nor say a word to him. Well, at least to be in the same room, at least to breathe the same air, at least to look at him. Her son, Wendy, was hired. She got to see her dearest person. Yes, their conversations were limited to greetings, but that was enough for a mother. And if that wasn't enough, there was always an opportunity to sit by the door of his office, under the pretext of cleaning, and listen to the sound of his own voice. Did James hold meetings, talk to anyone on the phone? She did not understand the meaning. She didn't get into his words. She just listened to his voice. She tried to work very well. She was tired, but she was glad of it. When she got home, before going to bed, she would go over every fleeting encounter, every word she heard, and fall asleep with a happy smile. She did not intend to confess to James that she was his mother. That is, she did not dare. What kind of mother was she? She didn't even try to make eye contact with him. She was invisible, like all cleaners, who paid attention to those women in gray robes, always bent over their buckets and rags. But James, on occasion, seemed to stop his gaze on her. Apparently it was because after a week on the job, he stopped and not only said hello, but asked her if she was tired. "Are you satisfied with your work?" "Thank you, James is very satisfied." With happy amazement, replied the elderly woman, "I'm not tired at all. On the contrary, I'm satisfied with my work." Everyone is satisfied. The office has become much cleaner and kosher with you, mumbled the chief and went on his way, a little surprised that he was so attracted to talk with this poor aged cleaning woman. Could it be that her eyes began to glow with such warmth when she looked at him? Thankful that I told her to take the job. Apparently, her life isn't very sweet. And she reminds me of my mother. James was the only and late child of his long-dead parents. He had learned since some time ago that he was an adopted son. It was his mother who told him after his father died. He was in his 30s at the time, and the news didn't make too much of an impression on the grown man. After his father became seriously ill, he took over his firm. I'm sorry, son, that we didn't tell you sooner. Dad and I wanted to keep it a secret forever. We're even adopting you to another town. Let's go. That relative of mine was in charge of the maternity ward. And then she called and said that the girl alone had decided to give up the baby. But we went to pick you up. No one knew. We came home. A month later, they said you were born in a good maternity hospital there. So what's the big deal? Mommy, could you keep quiet? But nothing's changed from what I found out either, has it? Really, darling, I mean for me. What about you? You might want to know who your parents were. We don't know. We haven't even seen your mother. We don't know her name. A relative said she was a young girl, a student. Oh, come on. I saw my mom. I can see her now. There she is right in front of my nose. James kissed his mother on the cheek. Why should I look for any other parents? Think about it. We're not strangers to each other. We're the closest thing we have to family. We are. Or do you want me back? No way. You'll say the same thing. But if I saw this girl, I'd bow down at her feet. She gave birth to such a wonderful boy. Come on, Mom. That girl is probably a grandmother by now, married, had other children already planned. She doesn't even remember me. And I only remember you. And who gave birth to me? I don't think it matters. Thank you, honey. Daddy and I are so lucky. My mother wiped away her tears. I'm the lucky one. I didn't grow up in an orphanage. I didn't grow up in a college dorm. I grew up with you, the best parents. James's childhood really was a happy one. His parents did everything he needed to do and much more. He received a great upbringing and education. Never felt unhappy or abandoned. He was always loved, surrounded by care with his son. And he really loved his parents very much. But after his foster mother's confession, no, yes, and thoughts of those who had produced him surfaced. Sometimes in the morning or evening, James would pause in front of the mirror, look at his reflection and wonder who I was, who were my parents and more distant ancestors. Would I never know their names or that is, my last name? After all, it's probably not right. Anyway, the thought of finding out about my roots didn't cross my mind for a long time until after my adoptive mother died. James, already a married father himself, thought about the fact that after all, he could have tried to find his relatives. After all, he might have, and even probably has, not only parents, but siblings as well. But how would he know now? He didn't ask his mother what maternity hospital he was born in. And there are quite a few of them. James even shared his doubts with his wife, but she didn't quite understand. I think, dear, you're being dramatic in vain. So what? We are of princely blood, or what? I know my parents and grandparents do not remember the names. They died before I was born. So what? I'm the same. A kinsman of no memory. I don't see a problem with that. And your own mother. Well, clearly, an ordinary hit came to study, and instead of education, turned out to be a child. If I'd known that about me, I wouldn't have thought to look for a woman capable of that. And James calmed down. That is, he accepted the situation, though at times thoughts of his kinship with the unknown occurred. He still loved his adoptive mother and could not answer which mother he thought of when he looked at this elderly cleaning lady with such a soft light in her eyes about the only one he remembered or his own. And Wendy was enjoying it more and more every day that she could be near her son, almost unseen and unnoticed by us. A joy, of course, and it was peppered with a fair amount of bitterness. Yes, she had found her son, but he would never know who his mother was. She would never see her daughter-in-law grandchildren, and at some point she will have to quit her job. Even now, Wendy's arms were hurting badly. Her back will quit, and her son will forget her the same day she can write him a letter of confession and a plea for forgiveness. Not now, after the dismissal, and then let him do as he knows. and there is nothing she can do for her son. What will be left of her? Pitiful savings. A ramshackle cottage in the country, pictures of an unfamiliar and unwanted James Rodney. How I have wasted my life. But the fact that I gave up my son was probably a good thing for him. After all, if I had taken him, what would he have grown up to be? The kid's a pauper, the yard, the paupers. She understood that this was not exactly true, but one day she happened to do her son a very serious favor. That day Wendy, as usual, moved about the corridors unheard. She scrubbed the floors, wiped the dust, and now and then she almost involuntarily approached James' office. Some important meeting was taking place there. The old woman had no idea of her son's business, but she had a feeling she could not explain it. Wendy sensed that something threatening was going on in the office behind the glass door. No, the imposing men, all in suits and ties, behaved as usual, austere but sort of friendly to each other. Wendy had always even liked their way of talking to each other, shaking hands and smiling discreetly when they met during negotiations to be polite and courteous. It was the same that day, but something seemed threatening to Wendy. Oh, something's not right here, but there's nothing I can do. All right, I'll do what I can. I'll listen to what they say. The negotiation was not over, but interrupted. The men got up from their desks, scattered around the office, talking in a low voice. Wendy picked up a brush and rag and slipped into the corner where the most suspicious man was nestled. Before she approached, she surreptitiously turned on the recorder on her phone, lying in the pocket of her robe. As she got as close as she could to the person speaking, she started pretending to shake it out of the trash can without drawing attention to him. What she heard from the man horrified Wendy. But how? How to alert James to the danger? He stayed in his office, going through some papers. James understood that the contract to be signed was quite correct and would be mutually beneficial, but something was suspicious about the partners. But I couldn't refuse a long-discussed project on the grounds that it made me suspicious. If you can't articulate your grievances, don't mess with people's heads. Everything seems to be clear here. Yes, you will have to sign, and without unnecessary doubts. You shouldn't insult people by not trusting them. The negotiators again assembled in the office. The crucial moment was approaching. James put the contract in front of him, pulled out a pen. Suddenly, Wendy the janitor appeared from nowhere behind his shoulder. James said in a strategic whisper, "Don't you dare sign. I'm begging you." "Do I have proof that Wendy is with you?" James asked sternly. "And what are you even doing here?" Yes, his staff is no different from the madhouse they recruited. That post-retirement madam has been underfoot all day, and now she's giving you advice to the owner of the farm. With a sneer and a rage, her partner said, "I tell you, it's a ruinous contract," Wendy exclaimed, and seeing that no one takes her words seriously, took a cup of coffee and poured it on the documents. "What on earth is that?" shouted James. The other men jumped up from their seats. Someone politely but firmly took the cleaning lady by the elbow, wanting, apparently, to get the phone dictaphone out. "Turn on the recorder, son," shouted Wendy, holding out her phone to James. Why did she first call him son at this very moment? And was he paying attention to such an address at this moment? After all, that's how many older women addressed young men. James turned on the recorder. From it came the voice of his partner on the phone. "Hello. Yes, I am, yes. It's almost in the bag. This sucker's about to sign. But first I gotta hear how much I'm gonna get for it." "Is that all?" "No, I'm asking you to double it." "No, I'm sorry, but it wasn't easy to gain my trust." "Please. Then everything will be canceled." "Well, that's different. I hear a businessman talking." "Yes. Now you can be sure everything will go smoothly." James put the phone down on the table, looked at his partner, who grinned wryly. "Well, yes, I lost, and because of whom?" "The cleaning lady." "Where did you come from?" "You old rat. And you're an asshole. What are you looking at?" "I'm looking at your parents. Loyal as any dog. And what have you got?" "Nothing. You got everything by birthright." "Well, go ahead and choke on it. Golden boy. All the best to you. And a long dry grave to you, old woman." He went out in silence, and Wendy was suddenly so relieved. and at the same time so crushed her chest that she sank quietly to the floor unconscious. When she came to, she was in a hospital room, and obviously not in some out-of-the-way hospital. It was a separate room with a good repair of equipment, and most importantly, on the bedside table in the headboard was a large, beautiful bouquet of flowers. Who else could have taken care of her like that? Only him. James, who didn't even know she was his mother. What a kind and noble man he is after all. And she's good too. Saved her son, if not from death, then from a lot of trouble. Now there's no shame in dying. And even the fact that James wouldn't know who she was to him didn't matter either. As long as she enjoyed such thoughts, James himself entered the room. "Hello, Wendy. How are you feeling?" "You're feeling much better. Thanks for the flowers. And for everything." "James, what happened to me?" "A heart attack. But I talked to the doctor. I'll be fine. Thank you so much, too. You saved my life. But I'd like to ask you a question, if I may. Anything at all. Why was I a son?" There was embarrassment in his question, and Wendy decided not to be embarrassed anymore. "Yes. How can I tell you? This story is long and not a good one, to be honest. It's very simple and short, though, if you think about it. You are my son." "Yes. I'm the one who left you in the maternity ward. I couldn't take you. I didn't want to." Fear. Betrayed. And was she, of course, punished by God, by life by herself? I don't know. But that's the way it was. And Wendy told of her youth, of her first and last such ridiculous love, of the betrayal and the life that followed. James, listening to this story, was silent for a long time, apparently trying to comprehend what had happened. There were tears in his eyes. Yes, it was hard to digest. "What about my father?" At last he asked. "I don't know. I think something even worse. He didn't become a famous artist, and by all appearances, he didn't become anything at all. Probably got expelled too. And all that bohemian fun didn't do him any good. I have not seen him since. It was only about 10 years ago in town that I decided to go to church and saw him there on the porch. He was collecting alms. I would not recognize his eyes, but he did not recognize me either. I gave him something, I listened to him. God bless him, and I went on my way. That's how you are, James, and I thought of your name. It's in honor of my grandfather James, the war hero. I loved him very much. It's a good thing they kept yours that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found you. My mother said she gave me that name because my father and I were God-given. There were no children for a long time, and then all of a sudden it was like that. I wasn't given to them. Yeah, I'm from my mother to my father. Thank you for being raised." Wendy was tired of this difficult conversation, from throwing herself on the pillow. James, too, was confused, depressed. "All right, Wendy, you get some rest, and I'll think it over. You know, it's not easy to take this kind of news. I've paid for your stay here, all your medication, so I think you'll be fine. And I'll be in again, and more than once, don't doubt it." James went out, and Wendy lay smiling. How well everything had worked out, and she had helped her son in any way she could, and told him everything. Would he forgive her betrayal? Would they see each other again? It didn't matter to her anymore. She was perfectly happy. James arrived the next day. He said hello. He walked right up to her, hugged her, and kissed her for real. I talked to the doctor about it. He said that you could very well go on recovering at home. Mama, yes, Mama, and you will come with me to my place where you will go on living. Our conversation about the most important thing took only 10 minutes. That's not long enough. There's still a lot I want to learn about my own family, but I also want to tell you about myself, and you should meet your grandchildren. They are big now. I'm not taking you in. Don't worry. So have you forgiven me, son? Wiping away my tears, Wendy asked. I have the right to judge you. Not for you to forgive. Not for anything. Mom, it's just time for us to be a family. That's what. And your family will definitely accept me. I don't need much. I have a house and money. So if you're out of pity, don't talk nonsense. Mom, if you want to live separately, it's your will. But now my wife and children are waiting for you eagerly. What happiness, whispered Wendy. She was very well received indeed. She somehow effortlessly felt like a member of a large and close-knit family of the kind I had dreamed of. We had a family of 3, just my parents, and then I left, leaving my elders behind. Although our whole private sector was one family. And let's all go there together sometime. And on New Year's Eve, I have a Christmas tree growing on my property. We can decorate it. The grandchildren were very excited. 2 teenage boys did just that. This New Year's vacation in the private sector was a real introduction for James to his family's history, which he was eager to learn.